Today we're gonna make macaroni and cheese. It is different than boxed macaroni and cheese. It is not gonna be orange in color. They add color to it to make it that color, okay? And we are gonna make a bechamel sauce, which is a cream sauce with cheese added to it, and then we're gonna add that to the pasta, okay? So looking over the ingredients first and then the directions. Before we even start with ingredients, if you are the cook, you need to immediately come into class. Fill your stock pot halfway full with hot water and get it on to boil. You're gonna turn the dial to high and the lid is gonna be on because we need to get our pasta in as soon as we possibly can. Going back to the ingredients. So what we need is 7 ounces of dried elbow macaroni, 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 cups of milk, 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese, a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, a teaspoon of dried mustard, 1/4 teaspoon cup of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a tablespoon of tapatio. So equipment that we need listed, I gotta grab my 1/4 cup. So we need the our water's boiling. We'll talk about that in a minute. So you need the 1/4 cup dry, the 1 cup dry, the large liquid measuring cup, 2 custard cups, small plastic bowl, small metal bowl, and measuring spoons. That's what you should have listed on number 1 under planning the lab. I want to do our macaroni first because our water is boiling and that way we can get it in and ready. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to do 7 ounces of pasta. On the scale, it is set at 0 with this bowl on it. Do not take the bowl off. You are going to get it so that the red goes over here between the 6 and the 8 at 7. You're going to use the scoop that's in the pasta. And you're going to spoon it in until it reaches 7. You measured pasta in 7th grade when we made fettuccine Alfredo. Okay, so it's at 6 1/4. Okay, it's a little bit over, so I'm gonna take a couple pieces out. And it is at 7. You're gonna take the bowl off. You're gonna add the pasta to your small bowl, put that on. Now, if your water is boiling, you can bring this back to your kitchen or have helper 1 or helper 2 come up and get this. Number 2 says you're gonna add the elbow macaroni and cook about 10 minutes until al dente. Okay? Before I put the pasta in, I want us to focus on looking at that water. That is a full rapid boil. Full rapid boil. That's what we need to be on. Big, large, fat bubbles. You're gonna dump your pasta in. Give it a stir with your pasta spoon and set your timer for 10 minutes. Do not put your lid on or it will boil over. I'm gonna move this out of my way. Under the pasta. Our next direction is for 2 tablespoons of butter or margarine. Okay, when we talk about butter and margarine, we are talking about tablespoons, 1/4 cup, 1/3 cup, and a 1/2 cup. The entire stick is a 1/2 of a cup, okay? We need 2 tablespoons. So we're gonna look on our butter and see how it's broken into tablespoons 4th cups, and 3rd cups. We are going to cut off, oh my goodness, I can't get this right. We are going to cut off 2 tablespoons through the paper. And if everybody does it right, we should have no more butter left on the demo table if we're a 4-person kitchen group. Okay, next we need 2 cups of milk. You're gonna put this in your large liquid. Now, if you make this at home, it does need to be whole milk. It needs the fat of the milk product to make the cheese sauce. Okay, then we need 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese. The nice thing about macaroni and cheese is you can change the flavor based on the different cheeses you put in. We're gonna put that in the small bowl. Then we need the 4th cup of Parmesan cheese. That can stay in the measuring cup. I'm gonna flatten this out a little bit. When you guys are doing it, you will have a larger container and you'll be able to level off. Then we need, let's stir our pasta real quick. If you're the cook, make sure you stir it occasionally. Okay. Then we need a teaspoon of dried mustard. Now I know you might think that sounds gross. It's not like mustard that we are familiar with that we would eat on hot dogs and hamburgers. It comes from the same plant, but mustard in this form does not have vinegar in it. And this is gonna go in a custard cup. Okay. Oh, actually the Parmesan cheese needs to go in with the other cheese. Sorry about that. And then we need 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Also in with the mustard. And a tablespoon of tapatio if you like it's a little spicy. And then the last thing you need is 1/4 cup of flour. And again, we need to spoon that flour in, level it off. And we're gonna bring this back to our kitchen. Okay, and we're gonna hand it over to our cook, and our cook is gonna start on the actual sauce. Stir your pasta. Okay, so it says, in a large saucepan over medium-high heat, you are gonna melt the butter, slowly whisk the flour into the butter, and whisk vigorously. Cooking 1 minute, vigorously. What does that mean? Okay, and it says that you need to cook it 1 minute. Do not burn it, okay? If you burn it, it's gonna taste burnt. While I'm in this cupboard, I'm gonna get out my sauce or colander, and I am going to put this in my sink because I need to strain my pasta when it's ready. So this sits right in your sink on its little feet. Okay, and I'm gonna get out my saucepan. I'm gonna do this on a high medium heat. Gonna take my butter, take the paper off, and put the butter in the pan, and we are gonna melt that. We're gonna get our whisk so that we can vigorously whisk our ingredients. Remember, our whisks do not go in the water to wash. You need to swish them around, use the sponge and clean each one of the tines with it. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Okay, so what we're making right now is called a roux. A roux is a fat and a dry, normally flour and butter, and it makes the start to a thick sauce that we're going to use. Sometimes we'll use cornstarch, which we did in our chicken fajitas, and sometimes we will use flour, okay, which we are in this lab. The butter has to melt first. I have 4 minutes left on my pasta, so that's good timing. Now, this recipe differs in how I've made it in the past. There's one other step that you can do to this recipe, and that is you would put it into a pan and you would bake it at 325 for about 30 minutes, and it gets it nice and crispy on top. While we're melting this, let's look at the back real quick. How could we lower the fat content of this dish? Mac and cheese, unfortunately, is one of those things that needs the fat in order for it to come together. So there really isn't a way. What could you do to give the dish more flavor? That's a different type of a question. What could we add to give more flavor? One of the things you add is different types of cheeses. You could use a blue cheese, which would be really strong and pungent. You could use mozzarella cheese, which would be very mild. So think of some different types of cheeses, and maybe other things you could add, like bacon, mushrooms, chorizo. Okay, so I'm gonna mix this up. I am gonna cook it for 1 minute, not letting it burn. And the reason that you're cooking it is you're cooking, off the flour taste. Okay, and I'm gonna let that cook. And then we're gonna slowly add in the milk. And we're doing it slowly because we do not want it to burn. And we're gonna whisk. When we make our potato cheese soup, this is something that we will also be doing for that. Okay, this has been about a minute. Pour in enough to cover the bottom, stirring vigorously with your whisk. Mix it in so that there's no milk. Then continue to add. Pouring so there's enough to cover the bottom, and then whisking. Mixing all of that milk in. Now my timer's gonna go off here for a minute. It's for me to drain the pasta, so I'm gonna set this aside. I'm not gonna turn my burner off. I'm gonna be very careful. It's kind of at the texture as very thin mashed potatoes. Okay, so my pasta is going to beep in about 30 seconds, and I'm going to take a quick spoon, stir it up. You're gonna ask everyone in your kitchen to move out of the way so that you can get through with your pasta. Okay, so my timer is up. I'm going to turn my oven off. I'm gonna carry this over. Pour it away from you. And then you want to give it a shake. And then you can leave it set in your sink, or you can set it on your counter. Okay, back to the cheese sauce, the bechamel sauce. So again, I'm going to add a little bit more milk, and I'm going to whisk this together. And you are just repeating this process. The slower you do it, the quicker it becomes thick. If you make the mistake of adding in all of your milk at once, it is not going to turn out. Okay, so again, into a thin mashed potato. Pouring in enough to cover the bottom. And then whisking it. It's going to get to the point where it becomes thin when we get all the milk in, and then we will slowly cook it till it becomes thick. Make sure you're scraping along the sides of the pan with your whisk, not just going in the middle. When you get to the point where you have less than a cup, less than a half cup, I should say, you can add the rest of the milk in. Scrape the sides, and you can slow your whisking down. You want to let it sit for about 30 seconds and then whisk. Sit for 30 seconds and whisk. It will slowly start to thicken. You will start to see big bubbles coming to the surface. That's when we know that it's almost ready. You can pause it.